Hello beautiful souls and welcome back to my channel Soul Journey. My name is Becca Himza and today I wanted to make a video about ego death. And I'm pretty sure I haven't made a video about ego death, but I'm pretty sure I have said I was going to make a video about ego death for a long time. So here it is, finally. Or maybe not. I may have made a video about this before, to be honest. I don't care. I thought I would talk about ego death because if I don't remember talking about it, it's probably been a while anyway. Do you know what this is? It's an iglan or banshee. It's a banshee. It's a banshee. We got this at Pandora at Disney World. Isn't he so cute? You're so cute. Okay. Just casual Avatar merch. No, sit. Okay, you got it. You got it. Okay. Anyway, today we are talking about ego death. And specifically my experience with ego death and kind of what it is. I have in several videos said ego death, and I usually at least get a couple comments being like, what's ego death? And from my experience, and and there's lots of ways like you can experience it. I'm sure people experience it all the time when they do like ayahuasca and mushrooms and psychedelics, but I'm specifically going to be talking about experiencing ego death outside of psychedelic experiences and just talking about a few of my experiences. So typically when I channel, I have ego death, and ego death is where you kind of like, I don't want to use the word disassociate because I feel like that has like bad connotation, but basically you just kind of like step out of your like ego perspective and you're in this like really neutral, in the moment space, and you basically lose like resistance to things. And there's different levels of ego death. When I channel, I'm kind of like in a semi-ego death, so I am somewhat aware, and every once in a while like I'll get this like twinge of like, oh, is this weird? But if I fall too far into like the thinking too much about it or getting too much in that like energy, the counts will actually stop. And in videos you've probably seen, they'll say like, hold please, and it's where I like really start thinking too much. So ego death is very, very in the moment, and I would say more in line with source consciousness. It's very just like, here's the things, and it's just like very neutral, and you're just like observing, and you're not super attached to what's going to happen. You're not super attached to what's in the past. And oftentimes when I'm in ego death, it's like I am aware those thoughts are there, but it's just like it's very, very neutral. And I've had several, but the one that is most poignant to me was when I got back from Australia. This is probably, it was a few months after I got back from Australia, and this is when I start having ego deaths. Hold please. I had a handful of ego deaths because I think I was processing a lot from my trip. I know I had an ego death that was very, the ego death wasn't traumatic, but it came out of a very like traumatic experience. When I was with my friends, I had this like kind of breakdown about not being in Australia, and it just like all the feelings that I had pent up for like several months, just like, actually probably a good year, if not more, just all this like energy. And afterwards I had this ego death. But the one I wanted to tell you about was actually a couple months after that, where I was hanging out with my friends, Marielle and Steven. And this is what's so interesting about ego death, is usually it kind of comes out of like, it like makes sense why it's happening, but also it like, it's not like chosen. Like I don't think I've ever like specifically had an ego death where I'm like, I am going to get into ego death state now, except maybe like with channeling, but even that, it's like, it's more of like a byproduct of like the space I'm in. And so I was laying on the floor and Steven and Marielle started giving me like Reiki and like energy work, and they were just like, not even like specifically like we're doing Reiki, but they were like giving me like a foot massage and stuff like that, and one was like at my head and one was at my feet, and they gave me this like lovely massage for probably a good like 20 minutes, half an hour. And somewhere in the middle of that, I must have just been in this like pure flow state, because when they stopped, I was just, this was probably the most intense ego death. I was just so in the present moment that like I was in this like experience mode. It's almost like I felt like I was like a newborn, and I was just like, what is it? Like everything was fascinating to me. And oftentimes when I'm in ego death, I will not talk. It's almost like I can't talk. I have no desire to like speak. It's just like I'm in full like receptive mode. And if any of you have had like a different experience with ego death, like definitely comment down below. This has just been like my experience and like what I've been calling ego death. But it is the most calm, blissful, neutral thing. And there Marielle's cat Theodore actually started walking into the table, and I was so like invested. I don't even, invest is not the right word, because it was like I had no like perceived idea that like it mattered, but I was so fascinated by this like cat that I actually started crawling under the table after the cat, just like, oh hello. And it was like in the back of my head, I'm like, this probably looks crazy, and then like, but I just didn't care. Like it was just like, it doesn't matter. And it's hard to explain in words, in 3D words, what an ego death feels like, because it's so not 3D. I also have this experience when my higher self will come in much more intensely into my body to kind of like perceive what's specifically going on, and that kind of has an ego death feel to it, because I'm kind of like stepped out. It is a little bit like channeling too. But anyway, so I was in this state for probably like an hour or two, which is probably the longest I've had an ego death. And what I found to be the most interesting was less that it was an ego death, but the realization I had that actually pulled me out of the ego death. I was standing in my kitchen, and I was so acutely aware that anything was possible to me. Like there was no resistance. I was like, I could create anything. I am everything. Like it was so in this awareness of consciousness that it was just like everything was open. I was like, oh, like everything is perfect. Everything is so in alignment. I could manifest anything I want. I could do anything I want. Like there was no resistance. There was like nothing. And then I had this, it's almost like the awareness I feel and assume you have when you're a part of source consciousness and you choose into a physical body. The gift of contrast. And I remember distinctly feeling I will not grow at all if I don't have the contrast to make me grow. Like if I can just achieve anything and everything, there's not going to be no growth in this life, because there's going to be no resistance to grow through. And even though in that moment I knew I could have everything I want, do anything I wanted, be anything I wanted, I understood that it kind of flew in the face of the reason why I was carnated into being a human. And at this time, I had just broken up with someone who actually was still in Australia, and I still really wanted to be with them at the time. And in this ego state, I felt like, oh, I could have whatever I want. Like I can create whatever reality I want with them. I could create infinite amounts of money. I could do whatever I want. It was like I was in the state of understanding that I could have anything and everything, because there was no disconnection from it. It was just like, oh, I can have it. And I remember consciously thinking, wow, I'm going to choose into being in a reality where I'm going to have resistance and I'm going to have restriction in my belief, which is going to cause me to not necessarily have all of those things because of where I would be at in my manifesting. And I remember even in that moment of knowing, oh, I could have everything I wanted, I understood that having everything instantly and not having any resistance was not the point of being human in this life. And so in that moment, I thought to myself, oh, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to have everything I want. I'm here to experience the contrast. I'm here to experience that resistance. I'm here to experience being human. Because, you know, you don't have to be human to experience the vastness of the universe. You can experience your oneness, everything. Like, that's not the point of being human right now. And so in that moment, I remember thinking, like, okay, I'm choosing into having an ego because that's the point. And I chose it very neutrally because I was still in that ego space. I was like, oh, the point is to have the contrast. The point is to have the resistance. The point is to be able to work through that and have that growth. And in that open, vast space, that won't happen because there will be no reason for it, because I would be infinite and whole and one. Because our growth comes from our illusion of separateness and our experience of separateness moving back into that oneness space. That is the point of being human right now. So without that, the point of being human was kind of pointless. So it was in that moment, I remember I was standing in my kitchen and I just had this like, oh, that's okay. Like, this is what it's supposed to be. I chose into this contrast, and that's beautiful. And that's actually why I'm here. I'm not here to transcend being human. I'm here to grow through being human and really engage in the human experience, because that's like so the point. That's why I incarnated. And I will have infinite amount of time to have the other thing. So let's like fully engage in this, in what it means to be human right now. And that's when I kind of like kind of came out of the ego death, and I felt myself almost like drop in, because it felt so expansive. I felt weightless and very light, and I was just like very like and I remember feeling like that, and then like my feelings started coming back, and like I started like having thoughts, and it's like my body and like that whole, it's like, I'm sure it was like all there, but like my consciousness was like coming back into like registering all of those things. And you know, within a few minutes I was talking again, but kind of slowly, and I was like, oh, that was so fascinating. My friends knew kind of where I was at. They're both on that spiritual path, and they're like, oh, what was that? That was so cool. And it was a really powerful realization, because it was the first time because I'd heard it before, but it was the first time I really personally understood why being human and the contrast and the ego are such vital parts of the soul expansion process here on planet Earth, and why it's so perfect, and that we definitely chose it. And it was just really powerful, because it gave me such a different perspective of my human incarnation, and understanding on a bigger level why it was there. And it was very, very cool. So anyway, that was my really big ego death experience. Like I said, I've had a lot of semi-ego death experiences. Sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, I spent half the day kind of like, and it can be very cool. It can be very healing. It can be very relieving. It really does give you some really cool perspective. And it is really lovely, and it can be nice to engage in that and explore that. But I don't want to say that like, oh, ego death is better than anything else. It's an experience here that you as a human definitely can have. But to remember that, and everyone's experience is necessary, and everyone's experience is valid for their personal growth. So I believe that all these experiences are awesome. But interesting to realize that in that fully expansive space, that like, oh, it's the restricted space that's going to cause the most growth. Like, that's super powerful and exciting. And when you have that experience, you really appreciate the human experience so much more. And that's really, really powerful. And it really just gives you a whole new perspective on this incarnation. And yeah, it's interesting because I was so fully aware that everything was open to me at that time. And now that I'm like in my ego currently, you know, like in the human experience, it's like I remember having that feeling, but like it's hard to like tap into that. It's like, oh God, I could have had anything. But I appreciate the wisdom of that state to bring me back to my intention for this life, and that's pretty cool. So Anyway, that's been my experience with ego death. If you had an experience like this, or you have any questions or anything like that, comment down below. I'd love to hear about it. I love getting your guys' comments. Like, it's been so awesome to connect with you guys. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that like button and hit subscribe. I'm not feeling well. I'm just in this, like, it's winter. Does anyone feel like really good in winter aside from maybe like winter Olympic sports people? I'm not a huge fan of the cold and the snow. Anyway, if you'd like to follow me on my other social media platforms, they are in the description down below, along with my second channel. And yeah, and my Etsy shop, where I do personal tarot readings for people and have other soul journey tools that you can check out. And thank you so much to my Patreon patron, Ayden. Yeah, I just recently put that out there and I hadn't really like advertised that. So if you want to join me on my Patreon, that's in the link too, or the description. It's all down there, so check it out. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. You're beautiful, and I love you, whoever you are that's watching. You know, I can't know you personally, but I understand that you are me, and we're all in this together, and that's really exciting. So, like, thank you to whoever's watching. Like, you're magic, and I really appreciate you, and whatever piece you are bringing to the planet. That's really cool. So, thank you so much, and many blessings. Namaste, and don't forget, it is all about the soul journey. Bye.